So Dana White just did an interview and he was asked what is his biggest matchmaking regret? Biggest fight that he could have put on in a certain time period and didn't. And his response was Fedor versus Brock. Now, the only way you're going to be able to relate with that answer from Dana is if you can remember that time period. And if you're a new fan to the sport, you probably don't remember that time period. And if you're an old fan of the sport moves so quickly, we don't remember anything that happened a couple of months ago, let alone a decade ago. But that I do remember that time. And there was some major talk around that. So Fedor had invincibility all around him. Not only was he the king, roughly 31-1 back then, but the one had a little bit of an asterisk to it. He took a shot, took a cut, they stopped the fight. He was dominating the fight. They redid the fight. He stopped that guy. It's one of those weird ones where many people looked at him as undefeated. I acknowledge he wasn't. I'm just sharing with you. He did have invincibility around him. Nobody was cracking that code. He was as dominant with a different skill set, largely striking based, as Khabib is right now, just by example, where you look at Khabib and go, I don't know what his weaknesses are. I have no idea. I've never seen them. It was the same with Fedor. He wasn't just beating 31 guys. He was dominating them. And he was doing things in that weight class that other guys didn't do. I mean, just for one example, he was pushing the pace. He was a heavyweight who weaponized pace, who could get the other guy tired, who could wear him out, who moved like a lightweight. So he had numbers and he had titles to support the invincibility claim. Okay. Brock, while he didn't have those numbers, Brock was like 4-1, 5-1. But that one was in his very first outing against a multiple-time world champion in Frank Mir. There was enough where you could look your head the other way, particularly when he comes back and claims a world championship over Randy Couture in like his fourth fight ever. And with almost no experience, all of a sudden, this monster's the world champion. So Brock also had an aura of invincibility. Now, he didn't have the paper and he didn't have the wins that Fedor had, but I'm just telling you what the perception was at that time. And if you could bring those two worlds together, particularly the fact that Fedor had never been in the UFC, had never had any meaningful fights that weren't in Japan, right? He was the big star over there, but they were on pay-per-view. We were seeing this in North America. The whole world was seeing what Fedor was doing, and we were buying into it. Okay, we got it, right? You go beat up 31 men in the heavyweight division. We got it. But it was still a question of, but before you can make the claim that Fedor is going to run him over, let's go ahead and do the fight. I mean, there was a number of people, myself included, we wanted to see Randy Couture versus Fedor. So when Randy and Brock fought, and we got the answer to that, which the answer was Brock, all of a sudden Brock steals that spot, and Brock was a little younger, and Brock was a little bigger, and Brock was a little bit more mysterious. You know, Brock wasn't doing interviews. There's an effective marketability strategy in remaining mysterious. There's just something about that, but it's very hard to do when your job is to be a public figure. It's a very rare thing to do. I wouldn't suggest that you go study the blueprint of the Diaz brothers or of the Brock Lesnars who refuse to do media and remain mysterious as a way of getting yourself out there. I would not suggest for you that that's an effective plan or an easy thing to go and duplicate. But for the rare occasion when it works, it works. So Brock's got all these different things around him. Brock is also always given a little bit of a dust off by some of the hardcore fans. And he was kind of blown off as this showman, all because he did a stint in pro wrestling prior to his MMA career. I never thought that was fair, because as much as you saw him out competing on Monday Night Raw, he had more years and more matches of actual competitive competition through his amateur wrestling days that people didn't want to give respect to. I mean, this was a guy from South Dakota. The hell goes on from South Dakota? Makes it to the University of Minnesota, makes it to the NCAA finals, comes up short, comes back the next year, undefeated, goes into the NCAA finals, leaves as an undefeated heavyweight champion. I mean, this is a true competitor who's also very decorated, who, by the way, is mysterious, who, by the way, went and found success in a whole nother arena. Oh, and who, by the way, is now back, and he's also the heavyweight limit and I mean, there was something special around Brock Lesnar. There's no way around that. And you can attempt to rewrite that, and you can attempt to dismiss him as much as you want. The guy was a real competitor that found in every aspect, at every age group, and every walk, success to the highest of levels. And Brock's a winner. So to put Brock against Fedor would have just been one of these things where if that fight would have lasted 15 minutes, 25 minutes, or more predictively, 3 to 4 minutes, it doesn't matter. To Dana's point, what was a huge fight that he wishes he would have pulled off and put together. Oh, and by the way, you have the heavyweight class. The heavyweight class is just the most coveted class in fighting. It just always has been. It's where Mike Tyson fought. That's where Hulk Hogan was at. That's where Muhammad Ali was at. I mean, it's just the heavyweight class. That would have been a very cool thing. But when Dana brought up that topic and brought up what fight he would have liked to have seen the most or where his regrets were, then I was asking myself that same question, but from a different standpoint. I'm not from the business or the leadership standpoint, just as a fan. What would have I wanted to see at a specific time and I didn't get my way? And I think that it comes down to two. I think it would either be Anderson Silva versus George St. Pierre, particularly at that time. They're both champions. They're both setting the world on fire. They're both in their primes. They just got to figure out this weight class thing and how we're going to get this match pulled off. Or, again, it would be Anderson Silva. But the other way in, it would have been against John Jones. And Anderson did prove early in his career he can compete at 170. He also proved in his career he can go up to 205. I mean, he did use the Forrest Griffin just by example. Forrest Griffin was champion of the world. He's a current Hall of Famer. He didn't get out of the first round. I mean, Anderson proved that he could go up. So I think it would be one of those two for me. And I think I would have liked it for different reasons. Whereas Brock and Fedor would have been competitive, would have answered some questions, but would have also been a spectacle. I mean, that really would be something to see on a poster, on a walkout, at a press conference, at a weigh-in. That would have been something that could have added more entertainment than just one night pushing a buy button and being entertained with a few of your buddies while you have a couple of pizza, right? That would have given you something extra. For me, the Anderson versus St. Pierre would have been much more tactical, and it would have been much more fascinating. The longer Anderson Silva with the striking, the St. Pierre, the master of grappling, master of getting inside grappling, keeping guys down. Anderson Silva, master of scrambling or finding submissions, but not going down and not staying down. I mean, there's so many questions that we could have had. And that fight, well, Dana's fight of Brock and Fedor, was also a very likely and possible fight. Anderson versus St. Pierre never was. And same thing with Anderson versus John Jones. It never was. Don't forget, we were living in a different time. This new policy of champ, but of changing divisions, that's a very new phenomenon. And I'm so glad it's here. I love it. I love the parity, but there was hard and fast lines back then from a policy standpoint that whatever division you're in, you stay within your division. So as much as the fans or even the media or even Anderson and George wanted to talk about making that fight, it never got off the ground, never got off the starting block. But as I do look back, George showed us what he could do at 185, which was win a world championship. Anderson showed us what he could do. Prior to Anderson coming into the UFC for the first time where he took on Chris Lieben, he competed at 175. It was actually a tournament in Hawaii, 4-man bracket, 2 fights in one night, but that was at 175 pounds. So to make believe that Anderson couldn't get a little bit smaller, that's not true. Anderson was one of those guys that could cover the spread. He never got the champ opportunities. But I do think if you look back at his career, should he have been given those opportunities, I think there's good reason to believe he could have succeeded. He might have been the original champ. So for me as a fan, you know what? I'm going to make the decision. Because I like John Jones versus Anderson too, but I'll go with it. My biggest regret as a fan of a fight that I wish I could have seen, George Silva.